So I wanted to take a few minutes with this video to discuss two new pieces of PlayStation 5 news, with one being around the next iteration of the PlayStation VR headset, which I'm personally way more excited for than the PlayStation 5 itself, and I cannot wait to see what upgrades come with it over the first headset from Rumors. It sounds like it's a lot, and the other story revolves around more developers supporting 120 frames per second on PlayStation 5. First, let me know what price would convince you to buy the PlayStation VR 2. I know for a lot of people with the first one, paying out several $100s for a new platform isn't an easy thing to do, and for a lot of people, they would rather spend that money on more games. The rumors have said PlayStation VR 2 would be around $250, and to me, that's an amazing price, but you guys let me know. What price would convince you to get PSVR 2? Let me know down in the comments below. Now diving into the first story of the video, dynamic rendering for PSVR 2. This one required a bit of research on my end because it involves some pretty cool stuff Sony is trying to do here. To understand this patent better, I want to go over two things with you guys first to get a ground basis. First, what does a saccade mean, and what does saccadic masking mean? First thing to understand is what's a saccade. A saccade is the fast movement of your eye when your eye is moving from looking at one point to another. So for example, when you're watching this video and your eye moves to look at the time, that fast movement is called a saccade. Now, what does saccadic masking mean? Let me read the definition for this one because it explains it pretty well, and I'll add to it myself as well afterwards. So the definition is: saccadic masking, also known as saccadic suppression, is the phenomenon in visual perception where the brain selectively blocks visual processing during eye movements in such a way that neither the motion of the eye nor the gap in visual perception is noticeable to the viewer. So the basic gist is that when your eye fixates from one point to another, you don't notice the movement and your brain is not processing anything visually during that point until you land at your new point, and then it stitches everything together to process what you're looking at. So now that we understand what this all means, what a saccade means, what saccadic movements mean, what is Sony trying to do here is essentially saving on rendering frames during those saccadic movements. I'm going to read a section of the patent that explains the saving aspect of this, and now that we understand both of these terminologies, this should be easier to digest. During a saccade, new images, frames may not be perceived by a user due to saccadic masking. A saccadic masking period may easily be around 100 milliseconds to 200 milliseconds in some cases. A system that knows that a saccade masking period is occurring can avoid rendering frames of images to save computing resources and power consumption. For example, at 60 Hz rendering and a saccadic period of 100 milliseconds, approximately 6 frames can be skipped or rendered with less computing resources during the saccade. In many VR systems, higher frame rates such as 90 Hz or 120 Hz are used. In such systems, more frames could be saved during a typical saccadic period. The total power saving of applying this technique may be related to the percentage of total VR viewing time that is taken by a saccadic masking period. So the basic gist is during the moments where your eye moves from one point to another, they can save on rendering images because your brain is not processing anything, which is pretty impressive to me to pull off something like this. When I first read on this topic, I thought of Sony's approach with rendering only what you're looking at in PlayStation 5 games, since the SSD is that fast to just pull everything at that moment. I know I usually say that this is just a patent, so it's up in the air if it happens or not, which of course is the case, but this sounds right in line with what Sony would want to do with VR, considering their focus with rendering and saving on resources. Also, with this, considering they're saving in some places, maybe it could be possible to reroute those savings into rendering more detail elsewhere. Either way, this was some really interesting stuff to read. Let me know if hearing stuff like this gets you excited for PSVR 2. It certainly gets me hyped, as you guys can tell, but what about you guys? Let me know down in the comments below. Now, diving into the second story of the video, more developers supporting 120 frames on PlayStation 5. I believe most games are trying to target 4K 60, but I've seen a lot of people in my past videos want the option to run at higher frames at lower resolutions, so something like 120 frames at 1080p. I've heard some people would rather have that instead of 4K 60. We have heard GT7 would be targeting 120 frames and even possibly 240 frames, which for me is a bit of an overkill. But we've heard Dirt 5 will also be running at 120 frames per second as an option for Xbox Series X. I don't believe they've confirmed anything for the PlayStation 5 in this aspect, but we'll see. And now we have another developer coming out discussing 120 frames for their game, Valorant. For people who don't know this game, and it's surprising if you don't because they have ads blasting all over YouTube, it's a mix of CSGO and hero-based shooters like Overwatch. But to continue, here's their statement. In terms of performance, we believe getting Valorant running at 120Hz on next-gen consoles is an achievable goal. This is mostly thanks to the aggressive performance targets that Valorant initially set. During development, we put emphasis on hitting higher frame rates at commonly used resolutions. Being able to push 4K resolution at 120Hz comes with its own set of challenges. Even with optimized rendering and low instruction count pixel shaders, rendering a large amount of pixels takes a significant amount of time. Technologies like variable rate shading could help us reach those targets, and we will be evaluating them for higher end hardware and next-gen consoles in the near future. So, this discussion of 120 frames per second might be more common because of the technologies that come with next-gen consoles, and 120 frames per second might be more commonplace for some type of games in the future because I'll say this, Valorant isn't really the most graphically intensive game out there, but for competitive games such as Valorant, hearing 120 frames per second is probably music to some people's ears for sure. But you guys let me know if you care more about frames or resolution, which is more important to you. I'm personally fine with 60 frames per second, but that's because I've never really tried 120 frames. But you guys let me know what you care about most, frames or resolution. Let me know down in the comments below. And if you guys did enjoy this video, please hit that like button as it always helps, and subscribe if you're new. I've got new videos every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. And now I'll check you guys out on the next one. And welcome back to the after show. This is the part of the video where we have a little fun down in the comments below. If you're old, welcome back. If you're new, welcome. For today's thing, what I want you guys to do is to body, obliterate, destroy, and overall harass the comment section with "Give me all the frames," because if we're talking next gen, I know a lot of people want those frames, and if you're one of those people, destroy the comment section with "Give me all the frames," and I'll definitely heart those comments like I always do because I appreciate everybody who stays to the end of my videos. And now I'll check you guys out on the next one.